So let me say this as well. I am not a licensed psychologist. I'm not a mental health professional or anything like that. I'm a preacher. And I preach the Bible, and I believe that God couples counseling and all that stuff like that with biblical leadership. What I'm going to talk to you about today is your mental health, where you are in your life. Is your soul prospering? I'm going to use a guy in the Bible by the name of David. I'm going to talk you through situations in his life. And I want to help you navigate through where I believe many of us find ourselves at times to get you to where God wants you to be. So I'm talking about obscurity this month. And I want to show you more of what obscurity isn't and what isolation is. So my title of my sermon this morning is You Can Run, But You Can't Hide. Look at your neighbor and say, you can run, but you can't hide. I want you to start. I got to set the baseline before I talk to you about this today. I'm going to give you a couple of affirmations. I want you to say it with me. There's nothing wrong with me. Say, there's nothing wrong with me. Say, God made me the way I ought to be. Anybody glad about that? I may not be what you think I should be, but God made me the way I ought to be. Say this with everything you got in you. I have issues, but they don't define me. I need you to say this because Satan tries to convince many of us this last line is not true. Say this, I need God. I need relationships. I am needed. I am necessary. So the other morning, probably about 3:40, I was up and I was playing Jeopardy on my phone. I was winning. Nothing wrong with playing Jeopardy. At 3:40 in the morning, my mind was just going. I went from Jeopardy to Sudoku. I went from there to I tried to read a book on Kindle. Anybody have a mind? Anybody's mind just ever just start going? And I love the phone. If you own it now, text them, let them know you're at church. Come back with them next week. I don't think there's anything wrong. Some people demonize the phone. It's just how you use it. And so I was up, and I remember I was trying to figure things out, just like I should be here, I should be doing this, and it was in my head. And I remember the Lord spoke to me and said, you can't withdraw to that place. You got to talk. Have you talked to anybody about what you're trying to do? Because I believe many of us put ourselves in time out, and God is still time in. He's still doing something. But the enemy's job, and I believe through the pandemic and just through life in general, you're looking in this room right now, you don't know what half these people are going on in their mind. Y'all are some beautiful people in here. Man, all shades and complexions and sizes and giftings and anointings. It's a beautiful room in here. We have, but on the inside, I want you to be as good as you look. And it takes being able to deal with the thoughts the enemy puts in your head, because the enemy is trying to convince you that you can do things alone or on your own terms. He's trying to convince you don't need people, you don't need church. And his ultimate job is to convince you that you don't need God and you become your own God. You say, I'll never do that. Now, we do it more than we think. When you become your own sense of reasoning and your own sense of counsel, you will drive yourself crazy. Yeah, you will. When I was in Chattanooga, I saw this homeless man, and he broke up a fight that wouldn't even happen. He was with himself. He was walking down the road, and he jumped and then went back at the side. I was like, who he fighting? He fighting himself. But many of y'all, the inside of your head, if we could put a movie, y'all going back and forth with yourself. One of the things y'all is culture-wide that we're dealing with is the concept of isolation. And many believers are confusing isolation with obscurity. Isolation is something you put yourself in. Obscurity is a place that God takes you to. Why do we self-isolate? Jason, why do you self-isolate? Because I'm just as guilty. We self-isolate when we are embarrassed about something. There are people, I remember one homecoming I didn't go to after I graduated. And I said, why did you go to homecoming? Well, I didn't get in physical therapy school. Everybody knew I was applying. I didn't want to get questions. So to avoid the questions, guess what I did? Avoid the question askers. Because I'm going to get mad at you and you don't know why I'm mad. So when we're embarrassed, we self-isolate. When we don't feel understood, when you feel different or disconnected, it's very easy to isolate yourself. When you don't feel worthy, you have self-doubt, or you feel helpless, you're like, I'm tired of asking people, and even God for the same thing. We self-isolate. When you have this prominent fear and this phobia or stress gets you, it's very easy to shut down. And although we can choose to isolate ourselves from others, society often isolates people. We have this tendency to isolate people who don't dress like us, who don't think like us, who don't vote like us, who don't look like us. Right. Let me take you off the hook. Everybody's not a size 2. And if you are, God bless you. Some people are a size 20 and it's fine. Healthy is the thing. Right. Everybody is not the Vogue male model or you just ripped. Some of us, the rip dripped and you just hear. Right. Life happens. And we isolate people. What kind of bag is that? Is that a Michael Kors? No, it's his cousin Donald Kors. Somebody. Yeah. Is that a Gucci? Or them red bottoms? Fool with me, I will spray paint the bottom of my shoe. No, we do this. In younger ages, they call it bullying. As adults, some of us just get mean. You start judging people. You start looking at people, and it causes, and we blame people for pulling away, but sometimes we push them there. So, but regardless, we find ourselves in these places of isolation. And I'm going to tell you something. There's nothing wrong with downtime. There's nothing wrong with spending time alone. I am an introvert, so when I leave here on church on Sunday, I am wore out. I need to sit for a minute. Like you do your phone, I need to plug it in the wall and just, I need to be by myself. I just need to get myself. Some of you charge the opposite. Y'all see a crowd and like, whoa, where y'all been? Ain't time to go home. Y'all just wired up. And some of y'all are like, I can't wait for y'all to leave. I'm glad you're here. That's not being timid or being arrogant or anything. It's just how we charge. But we all got to have a moment where we get ourselves together. Alone time is necessary because here's the reality. If you don't take care of yourself, you're going to find yourself in a deficit. You are the only you we have of all times. So I know that self-care is a big thing. Self-care is not selfish. And I say that self-care is not selfish. It's making sure I'm in a place to do what I'm called to do. Yeah. You need some time. But when you socially isolate yourself, you put your mental and physical health at risk. You have higher rates of anxiety and depression and even suicide because you try to figure it out on your own. We are not designed to be by ourselves. Even God, when he created Adam, he said, it ain't good that man should be alone. When you are left to yourself, and if you ever become your own counselor, it ain't always good. Because you put yourself in a place and you'll say God said things that God ain't saying. And some of us as believers make God seem schizophrenic. So in one moment he had you here and the next moment he's got you here and it's like, all right. So today I want to show you what isolation is, but then to show you how when God has you in obscurity, what it is and what it isn't. I know this because I deal with this. Let me tell you what obscurity is not. Obscurity is not punishment. God is not angry with you. He's not upset with you. He's not through with you. He's not throwing you away. Obscurity is not punishment. It's not fear. It's not some people arrogantly withdraw from situations and relationships like you take your ball and go home. That's not what obscurity is. Obscurity is not an excuse to be antisocial. It's not running from people. Well, y'all was shouting a minute ago. Not just playing. It's not a time out. It's time in with God. It's true. Obscurity is where God does this in your life. He develops you. He takes you to a place of revelation, a place of restoration, a place of protection, a place of correction, and a place of building. And I want to show you how God does it. There was a guy in the Bible by the name of David. They sung that first song, When the Spirit of the Lord Comes Upon My Heart. David danced, so he said, listen, he danced out his linen ephod, and he just danced. He said, kings ain't supposed to do that. Some of you said, listen, I can have a PhD, make 6 figures a year, but when I think of the goodness of Jesus, I don't care how much money I do have or I don't have. You don't know like I know what the Lord has done. Some of y'all get real stiff and real deep when you come to church and you just, listen, that God says, you thank me for what I've done, and you have the freedom to do that. But the same David, the one hand he's dancing, and the next he's running from his boss. Saul was this jealous, insecure man who wanted to kill him. And his insecurity had nothing to do with David. Let me tell you something here. Most of you who are dealing with insecurity or people who are insecure, it has nothing to do with you. Right. Don't you dummy down who you are because somebody is insecure. No, people have insecurities and we project them onto others. if I'm not comfortable with myself, I'm going to make you uncomfortable. Man, my face used to break out really bad, and I had these mountains on my head. They were like pimples, and you could always tell when I had them because I couldn't look people in the eye. I was scared to come around. I just like being around people, and the whole conversation was awkward because I thought you were staring in my face. You probably were. It's just a part of life. My body was responding. Some of you are dealing with stuff right now, and you didn't ask for it. It's just what you're dealing with, and God said, I'm going to pull you out of a place of isolation to a place of health and show you what I'm doing in your life. Touch your neighbor and say, God is doing something. So here we have this David who is running from Saul. And let me show you where David went. David therefore departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. So when his brothers and his father's house heard it, they went down to him. It says, and everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontented gathered to him. So he became captain over them. And there was about 400 men with him. Then David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. And he said to the king of Moab, please let my father and mother come here with you until I know what God will do for me. So he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the time. And David was in, somebody say, the stronghold. All right. So now the prophet of Gad shows up and says to David, don't stay in the stronghold. Depart, go to the land of Judah. So David departed and went into the forest of Hereth. So I'm going to show you when life hits you, when you have those moments, how not to self-isolate, but how to let God take you to a place of obscurity so you can hear from him. Number one, God's answer to people in isolation is people. God's answer to isolation is people. That's like the exact opposite. Because when you don't want to be bothered, you don't want to be bothered. I'm like, all right, I'm trying to get myself together. What do you want? Look what David's family did. He said his father and his brothers heard that he went down to the cave. Where did they go? They went and got him. When people love you, they're not going to let you stay in a place of isolation. They showed up to tell him this: you are needed. You are necessary. Your presence is needed in life. People who love you will show up. Notice who did not show up. God didn't allow his enemies to find him when he was dealing with his issues. Nor did his friends show up with his Saul's head. They showed up for him. Notice who else showed up. Not only did his brothers and his father's house show up, everyone who was in debt, everybody who was in distress, everybody who was discontented. God, why can't you send me the people who are out of debt? Why can't you send me the people who are cool, calm, and collected? Why can't you send me the people that are satisfied with life? Why are you sending me people who are going through like I'm going through? They didn't show up because David had problems. They showed up because of David's potential. They saw that something in him, and something inside of David stood up in this moment. It is funny. I don't know if y'all have ever experienced this. When you feel like you're going through and you cannot take it, God has a way of pulling on your call. Why are you messing with me about my call? Why you got me dreaming in moments where I just don't want to be bothered? Why you got people asking me for help and I need help? What am I going to help them with? What, we going to sit here and cry together? Just sit here and smoke all day, just drink all, what we going to do? God knows this about you, though. When you're in isolation, his answer is people. The right people. Because here's what happens. You can change your crowd without changing your crowd. They connected in isolation, but God changed the discontented. He changed the distressed. He changed those in debt. And David became their captain. Their issues is what connected them. But if you're not careful, their issues will jump on you. You already got your own, and now you're dealing with somebody else's. Here's the challenge when you are going through and people in your environment show up: don't cancel them. Here's the whole thing about the whole cancel thing. You don't have to cancel people, just grow. Your growth will take care of the unnecessary things in life. It's called pruning. And God has a way of pruning you. So here's what David did. Whenever your crowd, everybody around you, and you know God sent them, you got to become the captain of that environment instead of letting that environment be the captain of you. Who David was stood up, what that environment lacked was faith. David had to stand up and say, listen, we got problems, but let's find the answer. Yes, we can. Notice, we wasn't there, but can you imagine it was 400 men in this cave. 400 and his brothers in his father's house. They could have sit there and cried and complained and sung songs, and imagine somebody had a harmonica, and they could have just, that probably where the blues was birthed. All these sad songs. But David said, no, this is not who we are. David said, know what? Matter of fact, this isn't even where I belong. When David spoke faith into the environment, and David became the captain over them, I want to tell you something. Many of you are running from places that God said you need to become the captain of. God said, captain that environment, and you learn how to be the captain everywhere you go. Can I tell you about those 400 men? If you read your Bible, do you know who those 400 men became? David's mighty army. These same weak, discontented, in debt, distressed people became stress-free, content in life, and out of debt. And the next thing we know, all they needed was a leader who spoke faith. Do you know what every environment needs? Somebody who will captain the environment and say, this is the word of the Lord. This is how you deal with problems. This is how, no. We're not going to shut the blinds and just call it a fast. No, we are going to go where God says go. You all right in here? Here's what else has to happen. Now, David was on the right track. He did need some time away, but he didn't need it how he was doing it. Time away without God is torment. Time away without seeking God, you are left to your thoughts and you will drive yourself nuts. You will relive situations that happened years ago. You'll talk crazy to yourself. The enemy will beat your brains out. You'll be speaking in tongues one moment and cussing somebody out the next. You'll be worshiping and thank you, Jesus, and then nuck if you buck. You'll be all over the place. Because what happens is when you put yourself in isolation, you push God out. I know. You push healthy counsel out. And you're just left to your thoughts. But God said, David, you're on the right track. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to pull away to hear from me. So David went from the cave of Adullam, a place of isolation, to a place in Moab called Mizpah. He went to Moab. Y'all know why he went to Moab? You can get a Sunday school lesson. He went there because Saul was after him and Moab didn't like Saul. He said, at least they ain't going to kill me there. They are an enemy of my enemy. They may not like me, but they're an enemy of my enemy. You'll be surprised who God uses when you're going through. They may not necessarily be for you, but they don't like what's against you. Come on. God will let a sexist, a racist hire you and push you into your promotion. God will let people who done talk crazy, he'll use anybody. How do I know? He's using us. And we're a mess. But David went to Moab and he said, all right, watch my father and mother. He said, until I go and hear what God will have me to do. Notice where David went. David went to, what's the last word up there? A stronghold. Many of you, your whole Christian life, you heard we pulling down strongholds and everything that exalted itself against God. Can I tell you what a stronghold is? A stronghold was nothing in those times but a fortified city that they built in a place that they can look and see who's after them. A stronghold was a defensive structure. There's nothing wrong with a stronghold as long as you're defending the right thing. But when you create a stronghold to defend lies, that's when the stronghold needs to come down. The lie that you're not needed, the lie that you don't need people, the lie that I need to pull away and people don't like me and they all crazy and they all this. When you're defending stuff like that, because Satan is an accuser of the brother, he will accuse people before you and you'll be surprised how many lies that we believe that God never said and aren't true, and we will fight you over those lies. No, you're just seeing things from a certain way. And God said, listen, I need to pull down that stronghold. But he said, David, you're in the right place. I am going to put you in a place, a stronghold, where I block out all the noise where you can hear from me. A place of serenity, a place of peace, where I don't want you worried about who Saul is after you. I don't want you worried about this. I don't want you worried about that. I want you to get to a place where you can hear from me. God sent him to a stronghold. That's called obscurity. Many times God puts us in obscurity and our whole goal is seeking him. Watch this. You come out of isolation looking crazy at everybody. You do. You say, what's wrong with you? I've been with God. He done showed me you. What I been doing? I'm just trying to please. I ain't perfect. He done showed me everybody, all my haters. You can't spend time with God and he talk about all your enemies. You can't spend time with God and he tell you everybody's issues but yours. Y'all don't know any Christians like that. They get in time with God and he expose all the demons around. He don't never talk about the demons wrestling with you. He talking about the demons wrestling with every other church. They got this. You don't, that's isolation. And you're judging everything. But when you have time with God, you say, God, I'm flawed. I'm a man with issues. And I need your help. I need your direction. I need your strength. If I got to put my plate down and fast, if I got to put my phone down and not watch social media, I need to hear from you. I'm not this cranky, running, edgy person. I need to get me back together. I'm not this negative. I'm not this judgmental. I'm not this defensive. God, restore me. In obscurity, God puts you in a stronghold so you know you're safe. That's what's wrong with many of us right now. That's why you're fighting. You're not safe. Many of us are not good at conflict. We're good at fighting. You resolve conflict so you can move forward. Some are just living to fight another day. God said, I want to teach you. And some of us are running. You said, stuff don't bother me. Of course it don't. You don't deal with nothing. Trouble come. I'm going with the Lord. No. It's in a stronghold. It's there in obscurity where God spoke. And here's what happens. He didn't speak to David just himself. He sent a person called Gad. And do you know what Gad said to him? Here's the next thing to transition. Gad said this, don't stay in the stronghold. You can't stay in obscurity. Once God speaks to you, you got to go where he says. And many times it's the place you're running from. God sent David back to the place he ran from, but he sent him back different. God sends you a word in obscurity. He sends you a word that gets you ready. He may not change the situation, he changes you. God gets you ready for what you're about to go through, what you're about to handle. And listen, when you're about to go through something, it's literally that. I'm going through. How many of y'all drove here from Shelbyville? Do you know what y'all drove through? Decent. You didn't stay in Decent. Came through. That's what many of us are doing. We just need to go through it. Get where you're going. Oh, that was a rough patch, but I'm going to get where I'm going. God said you cannot stay in obscurity. He took him to a place, he said, go back to Judah. He said, and then David went to a forest of Hereth. That doesn't make sense to many of y'all that maybe not register with you. But he sent him, the forest in that time was a populated area with beautiful green trees. It was a place of prosperity. It was a place, a flourishing place. Up to that point, he had been by himself. He put himself in timeout. So God said, no, that ain't good for you. I'm going to put you in a stronghold in obscurity. All right, but now I'm going to put you back into society. I'm going to put you back into the mainstream. I'm speaking to somebody in here that God's about to pull you out of a place of obscurity where he's been teaching you, he's been dealing with you, and he's about to put you into a mainstream place. You're about to find your forest in Hereth. You're about to find your prospering, your place that God has for you. Can I make it all make sense to you? Here's what God does. I will, Tony. Here's what happens. In isolation, God sends you people. People to say, that just random people. You know, no, we heard you were here. Going to bring you out of here. He knows what you need, but he takes you from isolation to obscurity. And obscurity, God sends a word through a person. Somebody who knows no idea about your situation, who comes with a word from the Lord that says, you can't stay here, you got to go there. Somebody says, I don't know where you are, what you're dealing with, and I really don't even care. All I know is that God sent me to tell you this, that you cannot stay here. I got you together. I restored you. Now you got to go there. And then God sends a word to you to bring you in obscurity. Watch this. It's not just good that we shout there, but you got to go in the direction of your property. You got to find your forest of Herod. You got to find your flourishing place. You got to find your flow. You got to get out of that place of obscurity. I don't know who I'm talking to in here. I'm not no prophet in the Bible. I'm Jason Scales, and I'm telling you from the Lord, you cannot stay in obscurity. God's spoken to you. God has given you a word. Now it's time to move in what he says. What are you waiting on? Some of you in isolation. God's sending you your people. You ain't need this sermon. They in your phone right now. They've been calling you, and you done avoided them all week. God has sent you your people. He sent your people. He said, next Saturday, there's a marriage life group that meets in McAllister's. He sent you your people. And when you get there, God has a word for you. You all right? And then that word is going to send you to your property. I don't know who I'm talking to in here. But God's pulling you out of this place of obscurity because he gave you a word into your property. Stand to your feet all over the building.